All right. Volume. Okay. That's good. The volume is...
And for some reason, one of their economy reasons, I suppose, I got in about the 8th week of this 44-week school, and they closed the base
Mm-hmm.
and sent us to Memphis, where I finished the school. When I finished the school, they sent me to San Diego for assignment, and I was assigned to ComMats Asiatic in Honolulu. ComMats Asiatic Mats was Transport Squadron.
Mm-hmm.
So I headed for Honolulu again. I got to Honolulu, and it seemed that they played the trickle-down process. Whoever was the junior man got sent the furthest, and I ended up on Guam again. Very disheartened, because I was going to have to stay there 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still, this was 1948 by then, I was still only 23, not quite 23 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But one day, I hadn't been there 2 weeks. And one day they said for all of us to assemble at the outdoor movie. We got there and they said, we're going to Germany. The Russians have blockaded Berlin and we're going to fly over it. But we're only going to take volunteers. The amount of people, or we're only going to take volunteers first. We're only going to take the amount of people that we can put in our own airplanes. We'll get more airplanes when we land in Moffett Field in San Diego, California. So I went over to Europe, and at that time the electronic technician was not a flying rate. We repaired the equipment and repaired trouble on the aircraft. So I spent from early November 1948 till August of 1949 in Rhine-Main, Germany, where the squadron was flying over the Russian blockade.
Mm-hmm. What sort of planes were you?
Huh?
What sort of aircraft were you working on at the time?
At that time we were flying C-54s.
Oh, transports, right, okay.
Yeah, the Navy called them R-5Ds,
Mm-hmm.
but they're C-54s. Or actually DC-3s, I think.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
In about August or September of 1948, they brought us back to the States. No, well, that would have been, by that time, I'm losing it a little bit. I went in at 47 to Germany in 48. So this is 49 by this time. They brought us back to the States to Patuxent River, Maryland, and just as a holding point. They didn't know where they were going to use us. Every day a new rumor would come in. We were going to Gulfport, Mississippi, or we were going here or going there. Finally, one day, some guy came into barracks and said, "Pack your ditty bag. You're going to Westoverfield, Massachusetts,
Mm-hmm.
to fly the northern to Europe and North Africa route." So we went up there, and there's where I became an air crewman. the aviation radioman was flying in the aircraft, and by that time it was too far out of the war picture. So they sent us back to the island which we had captured, Guam, to use for a training base. We went back to Guam, and while we were there, the war was over.
So how long were you on Okinawa?
Oh, but the 80 days.
Okay.
We went back to Guam and were using it for a training base to invade the Japanese home islands, which Okinawa is so close that would have had to have been the last. The atom bomb was dropped. Myself, I'm grateful the bomb was dropped because I had had 4 invasions under my belt, 2 islands in Enewetak Atoll, Guam, and Okinawa. I think my luck was running out by that time. But I didn't come home yet. Somebody, I don't know who, decided that we should go out to China to ensure that the Japanese in northern China did indeed surrender. Because there were many people in Japan that didn't want to surrender. We went to a place in China called Tsingtao, and the Japanese did surrender. Had a big surrender ceremony on a racetrack, and they surrendered. And very shortly thereafter, I came back to the States. Was processed for discharge at Mare Island Naval Base in San Francisco and was sent home. My family were lumberjacks by trade.
Where was home? Where was home?
Klamath Falls, Oregon, in southern Oregon. I went home, and because I had been only 17 when I went in the service, and I had worked in the lumber camps 2 summers while I was in high school, I went back into the lumber business. It dawned on me very shortly that I didn't want to be a lumberjack, although my uncles, my father had been that all their life. About that time, electronics was just getting started. So I started seeing this ad in the paper that if you take this test as a civilian and pass it, that the Navy would send you to 44 weeks electronics school. All you had to do after that was choose whether you wanted to go surface Navy or aviation. I chose aviation. I took the test, passed it. All I had to do was choose whether I wanted to go surface or aviation. So I chose aviation for a couple reasons. First of all, when I was in the slogging infantry, I'd seen these airplanes go over. And while they might be in some danger, at least they went to a warm bed and warm meal at night. In the infantry, we didn't get that. We got a hole in the ground and a can of sea rations. So I requested aviation. They sent me to Corpus Christi, Texas, to a small island out in
No, I'm familiar. I'm familiar with Corpus Christi. I've been reading.
Well, there's a small island out in the middle of the water between the city and the naval airfield called Ward Island. I got a picture of it that I took off from internet just the other day for no other purpose than to tap a Morse code key. He didn't know anything about radar.
Mm-hmm.
So they picked 7 of us and sent us to a school in Anacostia, Maryland, military school, where they taught us how to operate and maintain a radar. They then, I guess simultaneously to us being in training, they installed a radar in our aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
And they designated the 7 of us as being radar navigators. And that's where I started flying. I stayed in Westover until January of 1952, where I transferred from there to Memphis, Tennessee, at the Navy schools to be an instructor. I instructed radar from 1952 till 1955. In 1955, it was a 3-year tour. They had established tours set up. Not only my tour was up in 1950, let's back up a moment. In 1952, I got married to a marvelous lady. In 1955, I was due for transfer. I had completed my tour on instructor duty, and they transferred me to, get this, airships, blimps, in a place called Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Our function was to make sure that no one identified Russian submarines got in close enough to the east coast of the United States to do damage. So we're doing sub-patrol up and down the coast.
Now, was there any thought
Huh?
that the Russians were coming?
Huh?
Did anybody really think that the Russians were coming?
They were there.
Mm-hmm.
They were there.
Okay.
That they were belligerent at that time, who knows? But what they were doing was the same thing we were doing in many places. They were gathering intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
They found one right off the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay,
Really? Wow.
counting the ships that were going in and out. So they were there,
Mm-hmm.
just as they were in Cuba later on. I stayed 2 years in the North Carolina base. And again, their old economy stuff caught up, and they closed the base and disbanded the squadron that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Lakehurst, New Jersey, where I joined another airship squadron and was there in it for about 9 months until the 1st of April, 1958. And I was again due for what they call shore duty. I had spent 3 years out with these airships, so I was due to go ashore again. So I went back to Memphis for another tour as an instructor. While I was there this time, they came up with a new rate in the Navy. There had been men made chief, and I made chief incidentally in 1955. There had been men that had made chief in the during the war and had never done anything since.
Mm-hmm.
To give people some ambition, I think more than anything else, they came up with 2 new rates. You could make chief, then senior chief, and then a home to rest up in between actions. We were there from probably around the 1st of April, 44, until June of 44.
So during these islands that you participated in the invasion, there was resistance on these two islands?
What's that?
There was resistance on the islands in the invasions?
Oh, yes.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
The reason that they took them was Admiral Nimitz came up with what he called a stepping stone theory. MacArthur had tried to come up through New Guinea and so on, and it was literally a stalemate. So Nimitz said, we can take a stepping stones, and when we get close enough to Japan, we can then bomb them. So Inuitok, well, not the first one. The first step was in the Gilbert Islands at a place called Tarawa, which I had nothing to do with. The second step was Kwajalein in the Marshall Islands.
Okay.
The third step was Inuitok. Now, for him to get to a place where he could bomb Japan, he needed one more step. So in June of 1944, his next stepping stone, the one that he could use to bomb Japan from, was the Marianas Islands of Saipan, Tinian, Rota, and Guam. Again, we played the same game that we had at Kwajalein. We were floating reserve for the Saipan Tinian fighting, and again, not committed. And so they sent us in to invade Guam. The big significance of Guam was not only that it was within bomber range of Japan, but it was the first American territory to be taken back. Guam had been an American possession before the war. Another bad part of it, or a bad part of it, was we were landed in the wrong spot. My section leader, a fellow named Bob Strader, and I got in a hole probably made by a bomb, and our platoon officer came in with us, and we were looking at maps trying to figure out where we were supposed to be, and the platoon leader was killed sitting right between us. We went ahead and took Guam and went back to Guadalcanal for more training and rest. And in the first day of April 1945, we invaded. We had been built up to a division by that time. We had the 22nd Regiment, the outfit I was in, the 4th Marines, which were the old Raider battalions, named the 4th because the 4th was the one that was caught at Bataan, and this new outfit was named in their honor, and a boot outfit from the States, the 29th, made us into the 6th Marine Division, and we invaded Okinawa. After we had taken Okinawa, which took about 80 days, because it's a big island.
Yes.
We figured we were going to go back to Guadalcanal, but Guadalcanal is down close to Australia.
Ooh, okay. Here we go. Okay, the date is May 10th. I am here with James Bradshaw. My name is George Huffman. Mr. Bradshaw, thank you for speaking with us. Can you tell us a little bit about your service, please?
Okay. I joined in March the 17th, 1943. Probably as much for just wanting a uniform like everybody else as for any highly patriotic ideas. I joined the Marine Corps. They called me the Marine Corps Reserve. They only allowed you to go in the reserve at that time. They called me for active duty on the 21st of May, 1943, and I went to San Diego to go to recruit training. 8 weeks of recruit training, and when I got out of the recruit training, they sent me to communication school, where I learned to string telephone lines, operate switchboards, repair those equipments, and so on. After 8 weeks of training in communication school, they sent me out to Camp Pendleton, California, to get a little infantry training, because up to that time the only weapon that I ever touched was the M1 rifle, and they wanted me to know how to throw a grenade, how to operate a machine gun, etc. So I was trained in that at Camp Pendleton. From there, I went overseas to Honolulu and was put in what they call a replacement battalion. Now, a replacement battalion had virtually no structure. It was just a bunch of people thrown together, and they were to go overseas to some depot somewhere, and then combat outfits was to draw from this replacement battalion. The replacement battalion was at a place called Camp Catlin, right on the outskirts of Honolulu. Sometime in November 1943, I was moved from the replacement battalion to an infantry regiment on Maui, the 22nd Marine Infantry Regiment. In January of 1944, the regiment was called on to be in reserve for the invasion of Kwajalein in the Marshall Islands. They always had a certain amount of reserve in case the outfit that was attacking got shot up too bad. Oh, we didn't do anything at Kwajalein. All we did was cruise up and down waiting to see if somebody needed us. When they didn't, and the Battle of Kwajalein was over, they sent us out to invade Inuiatok. In the Inuiatok Atoll, we invaded 3 islands. The regiment did. I was at 2 of the islands, an island called Injibi and an island called Perry. A 3rd island, the main island of Inuiatok, was invaded by our 3rd Battalion and some Army elements. After that, they sent us to Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands, which the battle had been over there for a long time. We were just to use it for a training base. It would give them a ribbon.
Unit citation.
Yeah, the top one with the star in it is the combat action ribbon. I heard one time that it took as many as 17 men behind the lines to support any one man in the lines. Mm-hmm. So that ribbon is given to people who served in the lines, mm-hmm. in the front. The star in it means I got it 5 times.
Wow.
The one with the diagonal colors over on the side is the Presidential Unit Citation. That's given for some conspicuous operation. We got it for a place called Sugarloaf Hill on Okinawa. That the Americans went up this hill something like 20 times before they were able to secure it. The next one over is the Naval Unit Citation. The star in it indicates that I got it twice. Once for the Marshall Islands and once for Guam. The emblems on the side were the ones that you wore on your collar. You didn't wear them on your white uniform or your blue uniform. You wore them only on the khaki uniform, or in aviation we had a green uniform. You wore it on either the green uniform or, now this is if you were chief or officer. The enlisted men all wore the sailor suit. Okay, the medals. The far one over here is the Navy Marine Corps Commendation Medal, personal commendation. These up here were unit commendations. That was a personal commendation. The V in it means that it was for valor. Bravery or valor must be listed in the citation to be able to wear a V in it.
Okay.
The next one is the Good Conduct Medal, which we used to say didn't necessarily mean good conduct. It just meant you didn't get caught. The 4 stars in it means that I got it 5 times. The ribbon plus 4 additions. The next one, the yellow one, is appropriately the Chinese Service Medal for the time that we spent in North China. The next one is the Asiatic Pacific Theater of War, and the 3 stars in it means that for 3 operations, the Marshall Islands, Guam, and Okinawa. The last one over here was given by the state of Connecticut. Or I don't know what the requirements were. My neighbor told me they were passing it out and I better put my name in. Whether you had to be in combat or whether just be in the service or what, I don't know. Down on this row, the first one over there is the World War II Victory Medal. The next one is the European Occupation Ribbon. The little airplane in it means that the airlift, that flying over the blockade. The next one was given by the German government. It's called a Humane Action Ribbon. It was given for feeding the starving people of Berlin, so-called. The next one is another victory medal, one that they gave for, I don't know, there were a lot of them, but I suppose the biggest one was when this lieutenant got killed sitting between me and my squad leader. Was probably the most horrifying moment. We tried, we rolled him over and we found a hole in his side, and you were taught not to delay. Go on with your business. So we slapped a dressing on this hole, and his dressing, that was another rule. You always used the man's individual dressing rather than your own. You saved yours for yourself if you got in a life condition. we slapped a dressing on him, and we went looking for our platoon. When we caught up with the rest of the platoon, the assistant commander, platoon commander, wanted some maps that the commander had, and he went back to get them, and when he returned, he said, he's dead. That was probably the most horrendous, but I've been under bombing attack. That wasn't a day of roses. I've been shot at, and most of the stuff that flies, you don't know whether it's going at you or somebody else. But on one occasion, they were shooting at me and one other person and nobody else in the war. That was quite an experience. We were taking wire up to the front.
And where was this? And what island
On
was this?
Okinawa.
Okay.
We were taking these reels of wire that you'd string when you had telephones, using telephones. And we liked to use telephones rather than radios, because the radios of that day were pretty unreliable. But telephones were reliable if you kept if you didn't get it sabotaged or blown up. We were taking wire up to the front, and we went down through a little railroad area. They used little small single gauge railroads on Okinawa to gather sugar cane, like they did in Hawaii. When we came up the other side, this machine gunner shot at us. There's stitches all now. And there was a field of grass of some kind in the area, and we got down in that grass and we bellied our way across the field until we got into some wooded area and knew that we could get away with it. We never tried to hunt this machine gunner down. We didn't know where he was. He was just shooting at us. We knew it. And that's about it.
Let's talk about your medals.
Well, most of them are just...
Let me see.
Most of them are nothing heroic. They're just, I was there.
Okay, well that's good enough.
The top little device up there was given to all servicemen that served honorably during World War II. I don't know what they called it, but we called it the ruptured duck. Then right down below that is 3 ribbons. They were for things that didn't get a medal. And they were normally for a large amount of people. If you wanted to give an award, you didn't want to give everybody a medal. So they were without being attacked. And one Navy squadron, not mine, but one Navy squadron forced a Russian nuclear sub to surface. And so they knew they were there. They knew that missiles, they never saw the missiles go in because they weren't looking for them.
Right.
But they did see them come out. And whether they all came out or not, I don't know. He could still have some down there, I don't know. It was kind of a chicken game that we could own a base like Guantanamo Bay right in the enemy's country and get away with it. They still own it. If they ever pull a Jimmy Carter and give it up like he did the Panama Canal, I'm going to be very exasperated. That base at Guantanamo Bay was given to us for freeing Cuba in the War of 1898. It's ours. We don't have to give it to anybody.
So when you were involved with the blockade,
Huh?
when were you involved with the Berlin airlift? The Berlin airlift?
Yeah.
What was it that you were doing there again?
Well, we were flying over because the Russians blockaded Berlin. And they cut off all road traffic, canal traffic, and air traffic. Civilian air traffic.
Yes.
And Berlin is inside of
East Germany.
inside of the Russian zone
Right, East Germany.
of Germany, and they don't produce any food or coal or anything in Berlin, so it had to be brought into them.
So you were based in West Germany then?
Yes, I was based at Rhine, Main, which is right outside of Frankfurt, Germany, and our purpose was to carry supplies to keep people alive. We didn't carry any military material, only stuff to keep people alive. Primarily, my squadron carried coal. Now, coal, if you had it like you do in a railroad car, shifting around would have crashed the aircraft because it would have changed the center of gravity. They put it into bags.
Okay.
First, they got a lot of Army type sea bags somewhere, and they'd fill the sea bags up full of coal, or as I suppose you would call them, duffel bags, and we'd fly them in, dump them, and if they had some empties, we would bring them back to the American zone with us. Later on, I think their duffel bags worn out, and so they used these paper bags like you'd get a bag of potatoes in. An amusing thing about carrying that type of stuff, this one officer one day got in his airplane, took off from Frankfurt, headed for Berlin, and the airplane felt awful sluggish. And anything he did wouldn't improve it any. He got to Frankfurt, Germany, and just out of curiosity, he had him count the amount of bags of coal he had. And what he had was, we were supposed to fly 10 ton each flight. He had 15 ton aboard.
Wow.
And the way it had happened was they used the Master Chief. While I was in Memphis for my second tour, they instituted this Senior and Master Chief, and I made Senior Chief in 1959, 1960.
Okay.
I spent another 3-year tour in Memphis and was transferred again. This time I was transferred to, of all places, Bermuda.
Lucky
Now,
for you.
I didn't go there to enjoy the beaches. What I was there for was to continue this anti-submarine stuff, but this in seaplanes, flying Martin P5M2s. While we were there, now I would take deployments from time to time. Once I went to Trinidad, once to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba for 5 weeks. But our job was anti-submarine warfare. But because our aircraft were long endurance, we caught the job of during the blockade of Cuba of flying looking for what they call interdiction, looking for German war on war Russian ships going in and out of Cuba, and intelligence work in Cuba itself. You weren't supposed to get within 5 miles of somebody's shoreline, but what we did is we violated the law from time to time. The intelligence people would say that we believe there's a missile site in this area. We'd fly in, do photographic work, and fly back out again. I spent a little over 2 years in Bermuda, and they decided that these seaplanes that we were flying, were obsolete. They were reciprocating engine aircraft, and we had got into the jet age. So in December 1963, they sent us to Jacksonville, Florida, and gave us P-3As, which were the military version of the Lockheed Electra. And I stayed with them in Jacksonville, Florida till August of 1964, in which I had completed my 20 years in the service, and I chose to get out instead of continuing. The main reason I chose to get out was I had 3 children. I was the highest enlisted rank I could get, would ever be. It seemed like every time my kids would get all acclimated to someplace, I would come home and say, "We're transferring again." So I decided to get out. I got out of the Navy, and that is a picture of me on that retirement day. I'm getting my honorable discharge and being decorated on the same day. I left the Navy on a Friday, August the 14th, 1964, and Sikorsky Aircraft hired me the following Wednesday. And I spent 25 years with Sikorsky.
What was your most memorable moment in the service?
If there's peace going on, they start laying people off. So I got in a vulnerable position, and I had some favors due, and I asked for them to be paid up, and I moved from this instructional job to engineering as a what they call an engineering aide. This is a man who does virtually everything an engineer does, but he doesn't have a degree, and so he's paid less money. While this was going on, I was going to college at night. In 1978, I graduated from college, and they immediately made me an electrical engineer. And I left Sikorsky in 1990 as a senior electrical engineer. And it all traces back to the military, because that's where I learned what an ohm and a volt and those big semi-trucks would come out. As soon as the aircraft landed, they'd be backed up to it, loading the next load. providing the aircraft was flyable. It might be non-flyable because of something wrong with it, but they'd be loading the next load of coal aboard it. They assume that the aircraft that was loading him at first didn't have a full load. So it sent back for another one.
Wow.
And he ended up putting 2 loads aboard instead of one. Another strange thing had happened, and this was an Air Force aircraft. This aircraft lost an engine over the Russian area, and the inboard engine on the right-hand side. And when the engine went bad, it started vibrating through its prop, which went out and killed the outboard engine on that side and took about 18 inches the end of the wing. So they were going to crash, that's all there was to it, unless they could get rid of this 10-ton of coal. There was one man aboard we flew across the airlift with a pilot, a co-pilot, and a loadmaster. That was all that was on the aircraft, because you could use up the space that a full crew used in more coal. The loadmaster is by himself. He's got 10 ton of coal in paper bags and an open hatch. Some way, and he could never explain how, he threw that 10 ton of coal out through the escape hatch, and they flew back.
Wow.
And made it. And he couldn't explain it. But he got a medal for it.
There you go. Now, how has your service influenced your life after the service?
What?
How did your experiences and your 20 years in the military influence the rest of your life?
Well, first of all, I said my military training got me a job at Sikorsky 5 days after I got out. And I think that's the biggest thing. It gave me a skill that I could capitalize on. I started out now the thing that got me into Sikorsky was Sikorsky had a training school, because if you pay $10 million for an aircraft, you want somebody to tell you how it works. So they had a training school. I came in as an instructor, instructing instructing military personnel not how to fly. They were already pilots or trained mechanics or electronic people or whatever they may be. But what was the difference between this new Sikorsky aircraft you're going to get and what you've been flying previously was my job. I stayed at that for 3 years, and I got moved to management. And I was in management about 3 years. I was in charge of all training devices that the company built. The customer always wants training devices so he can teach in a classroom instead of tying up an aircraft for instructional purposes. I was in charge of all training devices that Sikorsky made for about 3 years. And one of these, the bad part about working for a company like Sikorsky is they're tied to the budget, the country's budget. If there's a war going on, nobody gets laid off.